Visa Assistance is not a law firm. We do not provide legal advice. This information is for educational purposes only, based on past experience with H2 programs, is not to be considered as engaging in rendering legal, immigration, and/or other professional advice. Should you feel you need legal advice, please contact a board-certified attorney or a tax professional.
Hello. My name is Douglas, and on behalf of our staff at Action Visa, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar for the reimbursement of travel expenses for the workers. The regulations require that the employer must provide or reimburse the worker for transportation and subsistence from the place from which the worker has come to work for the employer, whether in the U.S. or abroad, to the place of employment if the worker completes 50% of the period of employment covered by the job order, not counting any extensions. The employer may either A, arrange and pay for the transportation and subsistence directly, B, advance at a minimum the most economical and reasonable common carrier cost of the transportation and subsistence to the worker before the worker's departure, or C, pay the worker for the reasonable costs incurred by the worker. When it's the prevailing practice of non-H2B employers in the occupation in the area to do so, or when the employer extends such benefits to similarly situated H2B workers, the employer must advance the required transportation and subsistence costs or otherwise provide them to workers who are in corresponding employment who are also traveling to the employer's work site. The amount of transportation payment must be no less and is not required to be more than the most economical and reasonable common carrier transportation charges for the distances involved. The amount of the daily subsistence must be at least the amount permitted in Regulation 655.173, which as of March 2018 until the Federal Register is updated in March 2019 is currently $12.26 per day. Where the employer will reimburse the reasonable costs incurred by the worker, it must keep accurate and adequate records of the costs of the transportation and subsistence incurred by the worker, the amount reimbursed, and the dates of reimbursement. Now, please note that the Fair Labor Standards Act, or the FLSA, applies independently of the H2B requirements, and it imposes obligations on employers regarding payment of wages. If the worker completes the period of employment covered by the job order, not counting any extensions, or if the worker is dismissed from employment for any reason by the employer before the end of the period and the worker has no immediate subsequent H2B employment, the employer must provide or pay at the time of departure for the worker's cost of return transportation and daily subsistence from the place of employment to the place from which the worker, disregarding any intervening employment, departed to work for the employer. If the worker has contracted with a subsequent employer that has agreed in the job order to provide or to pay for the worker's transportation from the initial employer's work site to such subsequent employer's work site, then the subsequent employer must provide or pay for that transportation and subsistence. Now, if the worker has contracted with a subsequent employer that has not agreed in the job order to provide or pay for the worker's transportation and subsistence, then the first employer must provide and pay that transportation and subsistence of the worker to the subsequent employer. The regulations require the employer to reimburse the H2B worker in the first work week for all visa processing, border crossing, and other related fees, including those mandated by the government that are incurred by the worker. You are not, however, required to pay for the passport, as the passport is for the benefit of the worker, not the employer. There are 4 times you will have to either pay or reimburse your workers for travel expenses. During the first week, you need to reimburse them for their border crossing fees. You've already paid for the visa, the consulate appointment, and for their transportation from Monterey to your workplace. The second time is for inbound subsistence reimbursement, which is due at the completion of 50% of the work contract. The third time is when the workers are getting ready to leave. It's for outbound subsistence. And should you receive receipts from any of the workers after their arrival home for additional costs, then you have outbound subsistence reimbursement. We've included an Excel spreadsheet in the wrap-up email to help you track and pay the workers per the regulations. When you open the spreadsheet, you'll see this section at the top. Save it as your master file. Enter your company name, your federal employer identification number, and you can copy the spreadsheet for each worker. Just rename each tab for each sheet as the worker's name and then save it as a workbook for the year. Fill out the worker's information, the date of their consulate appointment, and the start and end dates of the work contract. It will then give you a date that the subsistence reimbursement will be due to the workers. During the first week of employment, you will be required to reimburse the workers for their border crossing fees. As of October 2018, it is $6 per person. You'll find this on row 15 of the spreadsheet. You'll need to enter the date the funds are paid and get the signature of the worker as your receipt. The payment must be identified on the check stub as border crossing fee reimbursement. The inbound subsistence reimbursement is due at the completion of 50% of the work contract, which should be the date shown at the upper right of the top portion of the spreadsheet. You'll use row 16 of the spreadsheet to calculate this. You'll basically need to know how many total days it took them from the time they left their homes to travel to, process through Monterey, and then travel from Monterey to your place of business, and any legitimate costs they incurred while making that trip. We recommend that you get this information and any receipts the workers may have upon their arrival. Outbound subsistence is due at the end of the contract. You'll use rows 20 and 21 to calculate this. You should purchase a bus ticket home for each worker. You'll need to make copies of the tickets and of your receipts. Provide the minimum daily subsistence for each day of travel required to get them home. Get the signatures of your workers for the receipt of the tickets and the funds. And you also need to give them a statement in both English and in their native language stating that should they incur any legitimate travel costs above what was provided to them for the return trip home, to send you the receipts with a brief note of explanation so you can reimburse them. Should any of the workers encounter any legitimate delays or travel costs above what was provided for their return trip home, they should send you the receipts with an explanation for reimbursement. This is the outbound subsistence reimbursement, and you'll use row 26 of the form to document this. You'll need to make copies of any receipts, the check, certified mail, and we recommend you send it return receipt requested to show that payment was sent and hopefully received. We recommend that you obtain any receipts and travel expense information on the worker's first day of work while they're in the office completing their Form I-9s and W-4s. We also recommend that you use the spreadsheet we've provided in the wrap-up emails that we sent when your workers are on the way to you. We also recommend that you make sure to have the workers' signatures as their receipts, and make sure the workers understand that you're paying them back or reimbursing them, not just handing them money. That concludes our webinar on subsistence reimbursement. Thank you for attending.